to add to the Commissioner's presentation. We have is that coming through? Sorry. We have a necessity and an opportunity. The necessity is, like every other public service in the country, the London Fire Brigade is having to make savings. We're having to look at delivering for Londoners for less money than we have done in the past. I believe the plan that's been put forward does that. It maintains the safety of Londoners and does so with a reduced budget. That's the necessity. The opportunity is, as has been discussed, the hard work of London firefighters and the proactivity of London firefighters means that we now have the smallest number of fires, and thankfully the smallest number of fire deaths in quite some time. And that's excellent news. That's something we absolutely want to maintain and continue. And that gives us the opportunity to make these changes without compromising our ability to keep Londoners safe. And finally, the thing I would say that through this plan I'm perhaps most proud of is that despite the significant reductions that we're going to have to make in our expenditure, the changes that are being put forward do not envisage the requirement for any operational firefighter to be made compulsorily redundant. And I think at what is a difficult economic period, I'm very proud of the fact that any firefighter that wants to stay with London Fire Brigade, we want to keep them and we will be able to do so. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Navin Shah. I'm a member of London Assembly and Vice Chair of Fire Authority. I'm going to put across a different viewpoint from what you've heard so far. To start with, at the beginning, it is a matter of legal requirement. So I'd just like to refer to the very first slide, which stated the corporate view, which obviously we are bound by because of the Mayor's legal direction, because of which we are here consulting. This is a listening exercise, and it's really great to see the local residents, local councillors who have elected members, other stakeholders, firefighters, FPU representatives, as well as local trades union flying their flag. It's really great to see people here, because this is a decision that you will be making as part of your response. An important decision, because once you lose fire stations, once you lose your firefighters, let's face it, you're not going to have them back. So very important for you to listen to today's presentations, ask us questions, and make sure that you respond before the 17th of June, which is the deadline. What I would like to say is that, of course, the draft London Safety Plan has got some good initiatives, and we'll be working together to keep the authority efficient and excellent, which is what it is. But my problem is that the closure program actually is not acceptable. I do not believe that London Fire Brigade should be closing 12 fire stations, removing 18 fire engines, and deleting 520 posts of firefighters. I do not believe that simply to save £45 million, this is both the risk, because it is the risk you are taking with the safety and security of Londoners. I certainly am not prepared to accept that risk. The proposals, let's face it, the proposals within the London Safety Plan are as a direct result of the Mayor's direction to reduce budget cuts well over 20%. Now, none of this, in my view, is either acceptable or necessary, because 10% cuts proposed in one full whack, they are not necessary. When you look at it is about choices. The choices the Mayor has to make. The Mayor, rather than offering a saving of £1p a day in your council tax, could use that money which will save the closure program that he's consulting upon. The other choice, the Mayor had, he nicked 50 million of fire authority reserves before the May elections last year. This is to support the police service. Of course, we want the police service, but at the same time, we want a safe and efficient fire service. If you could protect police, why not give us back the reserves that you took from us 50 million? Let's remember, for 45 million worth of cuts, they in context of 16 billion budget, which the Mayor controls of London Assembly, really is not a vast sum of money. It is 0.4% of the overall GLA budget. That is what it's all about. So the Mayor has the choices. The Mayor also had a choice of accepting a balanced budget, which was agreed by the majority of Assembly members, which would have again saved the whole exercise of these fire cuts. As again, totally unnecessary, uncalled for. But what did the Mayor do? Rather than looking at any of those options, and let's remember, the Mayor has the final say in everything, because that is where the buck stops. It is his budget, he decides his priority, and surely priority to safeguard the frontline services of this fire service should be Mayor's priority. Unfortunately not. So instead of listening, instead of looking at the budget choices that he has had, he's actually overruled the democratic process, the democratic mandate, which was against the closure program, and imposed through legal direction with the fire cuts for which the consultation process is taking place. Let's look at what the Mayor has done. Absolutely nothing. Having imposed this whole exercise, he has refused to attend any of the public meetings. I think this is disgraceful. Not asking the Commissioner to defend Mayor's cuts. Mayor should be here himself, defending his cuts, justifying to the residents why he is prepared to take the risk, when we as the elected members and you as the residents are not prepared to accept any of these fire cuts. And you have heard what the modeling actually suggests. According to the Borough averages, 4.7 million Londoners, which is 58%, will see an increase in the time it takes for fire engines to arrive. Surely, this is not acceptable. Overall performance in London will get worse. London-wide attendance to an incident will increase by 15 seconds for the first engine and 16 seconds for the second fire engine, as we already heard. You may think, or people might argue, that this small amount of time is not important, but the fact is every second counts. For example, domestic fire can quadruple in intensity in just 2 minutes. Remember this. Let's look at the situation here. The closure of Woolwich Fire Station, a historic heritage of building, Grade 2 listed building, one of the first purpose-built buildings built in 1887. It's been statutorily listed because its architectural facade and the frontage is meant to be remarkable in terms of its architectural contribution. In fact, if I quote, it provides romantic detailing. Of course, we want to maintain and we want to make sure that it doesn't turn into a free school. You know, this is selling family silver. This is what it's all about. And we certainly won't have any of that. According to the proposal, not only Greenwich would see Woolwich Fire Station closed, but you would also have impact from the closure of Downham Fire Station as well as Silver Town. So this is about London-wide cover. So it is bad enough that Woolwich will go, but you will also have impact from a couple of stations, both north and south, closing here. The impact of these closures will be an increase in the arrival of both the first and second fire engines at an incident in Greenwich area, wherever within the borough. The average attendance time for the first appliance arriving at the emergency incident, you heard the details. What I'd like to move on to is something that we haven't heard. Critical information people need to know, and that is what happens at ward level. At ward level, all wards within Greenwich will see an increase in the arrival of the first fire engine. Specific to Woolwich Common and Woolwich Riverside, the two most deprived wards in the borough, would see a disturbingly huge increase in the response times of the first fire engine. And those are, Woolwich Common will see an increase by over a minute above the 6-minute target time which the authority has. And Woolwich Riverside will see an increase by staggering 2 minutes. Now, you have heard what minutes per seconds matter, and this is why we cannot have any of these closures, including Woolwich and London-wide plan that are before us. I want to end with an example which tells the full story, how dangerous the whole move towards closure is. In March, well actually on March the 15th, a fire at ground floor flat in Peltham Grove on Plumstead Glendon Estate highlighted how the London Fire Brigade responds to the incidents. The Plumstead fire ambulance was called to the incident but was caught up in heavy traffic, meaning that the fire engine from Woolwich fire station arrived first. Firefighters used breathing apparatus to enter the flat and found the woman unconscious in a back bedroom. She was on her way to hospital by the time the Plumstead fire engine arrived. Woolwich fire station, as we know, is subject to the closure. I don't have to say what would have happened to the woman, to the victim of the incident, had Woolwich station been closed. You judge for yourself. This is the decision, this is the serious aspects that you have to consider, we have to consider. I say no to such fire station closures. It is short-sighted, it is playing with fire. The mayor might want to play with the fire. I certainly don't want to, and I'm sure that the firefighters and the residents don't want to.
Opportunity to answer questions of the panel. I can see you're all putting your hands up, which is excellent. I'll come to you one at a time. Please, when I do point you out or describe you, just state your name and state your interest, firefighter, member of the public, borough resident, member of staff, councillor or otherwise. That would be useful, please. We have roving mics, they'll be handed to you, so you'll be able to speak clearly to the microphone, everyone can hear your questions along with the panel. I will take questions in terms of back to you, so please don't be offended when we move from 1, 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 questions, just to move the evening along so everybody gets a chance to have their view and answer the questions that they brought along with them this evening. Lastly, in the spirit of giving everybody the widest chance to ask questions, if you can please make your points succinct, that would be very useful, please. Okay. Lady,
thank you very much, Maureen Amara. I'm a councillor here in West Ward, Greenwich West Ward. I think it would have been a bit braver of you to have held this meeting in Woolwich, where you're going to close that fire station. Instead of hiding down here in Greenwich. The closure of the fire station, of course, goes hand in hand with the closure of Woolwich Police Station as well, which poses questions really about the presence of the emergency services in Woolwich. Now, what I want to say is, I'm also a cabinet member, by the way, for community safety and environment for the Royal Borough of Greenwich, which includes, obviously, this particular matter. Now, we carried a motion at our council a few months ago, and one of the key facts that I found out from the London Fire Brigade is that Woolwich Riverside, in which Woolwich Fire Station resides, has the 5th highest number of primary fires across London. Yet you seek to close it. Firefighters don't need definitions of primary fires, but I will tell you what they are. Buildings, caravans, trailers, vehicles, other methods of transport, outdoor storage, plant and machinery, agriculture, forestry, and other outdoor structures, including some can't read it now. But why are you seeking to close a fire station in a part of London that's got the 5th highest number of primary fires? Now, your answer to that would be, well, it can be covered from Plumstead. But you've already highlighted here tonight the delays that we're going to get in response times. I think it's highly irresponsible for this matter to be even presented. And why is that? Because Woolwich doesn't stand up for itself. Woolwich doesn't say anything for itself. Maybe that's why you're not in Woolwich here tonight. So I'd like a response to that, please. I don't want it ignored, as my previous question was about the police when I was here a few months ago. And I want to know about response times as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Alan McCarthy. I'm also a councillor. I represent Charlton.
This is a public meeting. It's always councillors.
I don't think the chair knew I was a councillor when you called me, and I'm sure there were
I'm
lots
sure
of people.
he did know.
I'm sure he didn't. We've never met. But
No, but just
if I could kindly make my point, I don't want to interrupt you. The point I want to make is, first of all, can I say that over the last 20 years, I've worked out that I've been involved in 8 incidents, some serious, involving the fire service personally, including being rescued from a lift myself. And one of the incidents was rescuing a family from a house on fire. I did that, so I actually am deeply conscious of the concept of time matters. You spoke, Commissioner, about the population change in the borough of about 19%. You did not give us the ward breakdown of the change. Will you accept from me that the census has shown that in Thamesmead moorings, the population change is 68% since the last census? In Greenwich West, the population change is plus 47% since the last census. And in Woolwich Riverside, where we heard from Councillor Shah about the increase in response times, and we've heard from Councillor O'Mara relating to the fires statistics, the Woolwich Riverside population has increased 50%, 50. Can you explain how that makes it safer to have fewer fire stations?
Gentlemen, one right.
Lane Duval, London Assembly member, not councillor, but speaking against the closure of Woolwich fire station, but also speaking against the proposed closures of the 12 fire stations on the basis of that London-wide coverage. I thought the Fire Commission quite adequately answered there. It doesn't make sense. And I would say this, and I do want to say why we're here tonight, because look, and I'm going to go on to make some non-political points, but actually the necessity for this, what the chair of the fire department didn't say is that actually we're unlike other local authorities that are having to make real cuts in their duties. We had the ability not to make these cuts. There were real choices in front of the mayor. We proposed a budget, a legal budget, that avoided these cuts taking place, along with the Greens and the Lib Dems proposing their budgets, and the only people that made the choice to cut this provision were the Conservatives. And then I want to say thank you to the majority of the fire authority that stood by the residents of London, who've made this consultation happen, and really in a way that would have been much more extensive than it would have been under Boris Johnson. I also want to say 3 of the 12 fire stations that are being proposed are being cut in Lewisham and Greenwich. And again, the arguments, look, I just see this fire coverage as an insurance policy. I welcome the decline of fires in London. I think that's good. I think that's down to your hard work. And I think people should be proud of that. I don't see that as being a drain on the public sector because people are being effective and efficient. I think the nature of our emergency services are about making sure they're there when the need arises, whether it's mass issues or whether it's riots or whether it's a fire or whether it's an accident. You're there, you're my insurance policy, and I think people are well aware of the cost of that and are prepared to pay for that. So I just want to make some of these arguments about why Woolwich is slightly different and why, as a constituency member, I'm going to argue for Woolwich, but I'm not just arguing for Woolwich, I'm arguing for the 12, because I think there's an argument that are pertinent to that. But let's go to the Woolwich arguments and why we're, and I concur, it is an insult really, it's an insult that we come to a ward that is the least deprived and the least affected by these fire cuts. Right? That's no disrespect to this ward. I think these buildings are lovely and I think the location's lovely. But actually, it should have been down on the ground because the 3 wards on the immediate ground that's covered by that fire service is actually very deprived communities. And I should say, I live in Woolwich. I actually grew up in Woolwich and born and bred Woolwich. And I've stayed in Woolwich. I'm a Woolwich resident, not just an elected politician in that sense of arguing why I don't think I should be put at risk through these cuts. Now, in terms of deprivation issues, that's where people are most likely to die, the elderly and children. And they are concentrated in these wards. And I urge you to think again, go back and look at the stats. And you say issues around population growth. My understanding is government gives you grant around population growth. And in fact, you recently had extra grant to make these cuts less worse than where it is. And here we are, cutting an area of population growth, one which is rising not just in Woolwich, but across the Greenwich waterfront, where we're putting people at risk. And I think we should think again. So I think growing populations, area developments is a case. Now, look, I've got to say this, it's not just those figures, and I did raise this, I have been fortunate or unfortunate to be in another meeting where you quote the borough-wide figures. I would have thought by this week, I raised it last week, I said I'm not sure why you haven't got a slide on, because the ward-based figures, the ones where Woolwich Riverside times shoot through this, it tells you another story that on whatever happens on these cuts, it is a worse attendance time. We've heard that seconds save lives. We're talking about actually minutes now in terms of Woolwich Riverside, and we've heard already a story, whether it was a human error or whether it was a traffic issue about attendance of the fire. If it wasn't for that Woolwich fire engine, that person could have been well and truly dead. That's the issue. So in that sense, I just think you've got to think again. And look, I just think, look, I know you have to deal with average times into coming to your issues, but I think it's also important that we tell people that average times means that they're increased on what you're being told. So that 30 seconds could become a minute and a half, even on the borough times. The average times on wards could be another minute on top of that, and that increases the risk. And I just think by now you should have had those ward ones up, because I think that presents a story. And I just want to say this, in all the issues and all the data that you've presented now, Greenwich Borough, out of all of London, has the worst attendance times, as the worst. That's what your data tells us, and I wonder if you can confirm that or not in terms of some of the issues that we face. So I just want to say that for a borough that's got a growing population, areas of great need, a fire service that is interlocking with others, and I think you're right about that. It's not just about borough people, but it covers others. But Woolwich just serve the Greenwich population in that sense. It was smack bang on that centre of that waterfront. And I don't understand that buildings at height, actually the times and attendance times for those fires will even be greater. And we have a number of buildings above 4 or 5 stories in Greenwich and on that waterfront. And again, I just don't think you're taking that into account. So finally, I just want to say this. Look, I just think that you should think again and pause for thought. I think there's some solutions about Woolwich. I understand there are problems with a big building that's historical as Woolwich, but you've got spare space in Greenwich Fire Station, you've got spare space in Lakedale Fire Station. You could save that engine for Greenwich, and you could save those firefighters remaining in Greenwich because the need is here in Greenwich. Now again, I think the ideal location is in Woolwich. I would say that, I'm a Woolwich resident. Actually, if we can't have it in Woolwich, then we want you to think again and think how it can be retained within the borough, servicing an area of need. Not just need now, which I think we can demonstrate, but future need as a growing population. So I'd ask you to consider that, if you could. Now, there's a couple of things that I do want to ask. And going back to the extra money that government gave you at Christmas, about was that really about population growth as one aspect as part of that growth? Because if that's the case, then clearly Greenwich has got a good case here for retaining Woolwich in an area of growing population and new developments. Thank you.
venue to hold this meeting. But what we tried to do was to organise the meetings in venues that met a number of criteria. And firstly was that we tried to organise the meetings as quickly as possible as the members asked us, staff members asked us to hold these meetings, so we give as much notice as possible. We were trying to met by venues that were as accessible as possible. They had to be able to seat at least 200 people. And also, to some extent, we tried to use the same venues, if possible, as was used by MOPAC for the police consultation. We felt it was sensible to actually use the same venues if we could. Now, that's meant that the venues don't always meet everybody's needs, but they all are all in the boroughs where the impact has been felt. So I apologise if it's not the right location, but we've tried to do our best in relation to that. In terms of the issues regarding population growth is one of the issues that's dealt with in areas of the plan. And I'll come back to Mr. Javale point about but certainly population growth is one of the elements of the plan and is assessed as part of the risk in London. We are aware of a wide range of developments that are taking place. Actually, every one of these meetings has been a wide range of large developments taking place in most boroughs have done that actually. And we've taken those into account as well because we are consulting on the development and the design and implementation of those buildings. The fact of the matter is that over recent history, what's shown is that the growth in population, the growth in density, and the growth in terms of new developments, despite that, we've still seen a lowering of the number of fires and number of incidents from the fire brigade teams, and that's because the work with the developers and the builders to build safety, fire safety into buildings as much as we possibly can. So, whilst the fire rescue service is always an insurance policy, we do need to take account of other factors and try to prevent the fires happening in the first place, but population density is certainly part of what we're planning for. In terms of the attendance standards, I mentioned in the presentation that unfortunately there are some places where the attendance times will get longer on average and others where they'll be shorter. And the more detail we go down to from borough into ward and then maybe even into streets, then obviously those impacts are larger because actually the closer you are to a fire station that maybe is going to close or proposed closure, then probably the largest impact will be on that area. But we've sought to provide the cover across the whole of London on a strategic basis, but also take into local accounts as much as we possibly can. So we do try to predict the future by predicting where the population is going to grow, by working with building designers and planners to try to build in safety into buildings, make sure that we can work with partners and local authorities and others to make sure we can identify those people most at risk for fire, to try and put interventions in there to give us smoke alarms, domestic sprinklers, provide them with the means to actually make themselves safe should there be a fire in their building. Finally, in relation to the government grant was increased where we thought it was going to be from last year. We thought we were savings within a total about £60 million. The rest of the fire and rescue service in this country argued very hard for a flat rate reduction across all fire and rescue authorities in the country. London Fire Brigade, me as an officer, obviously the chairman can speak for himself at the moment, me as an officer, I argued against that because I felt that was not the right thing for London. Because actually I knew that if population density and population growth was part of the government's calculation, that would benefit London as opposed to other parts of the brigade. So we managed to get an additional £15 million from government, so this was a reduction from 60 to 45 because we got more money. That was based upon, to some extent, on population density, but not solely. There was other issues in the calculation the government uses. But the reason we stood out from the rest of the fire authorities in the country, we wanted a flat rating decrease across the board, because we knew that wouldn't benefit London. We argued for London by saying, no, we don't want that. We want the formulas we run and plan and use to plan reductions in fire authority budgets because we knew that would benefit London. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to pick up 3 points very briefly. One was about the location itself for this venue. If the parameter for selecting a venue was the police consultation meetings, from my experience, they were an utter total disaster. So I think you used the wrong yardstick to base where this consultation meeting should have taken place. In fact, the criteria is very simple. Meetings should be where the people are, not some miles away. This makes total nonsense about the whole issue of having meaningful consultation of residents. insurance policy has been mentioned, which is what the fire cover is. In October last year, London Fire Brigade conducted a research attitude survey of Londoners right across London. People of different age groups were consulted. 3 or 4 points they made from memory which are worth sharing with you. On value for money about closure program, they did agree, this is your local residents, that, or Londoners, that closing fire stations was a good value for money. They also compared firefighters as heroes, taking their lives in hand. They also mentioned, they equated the sort of fire insurance like an airbag in your car. You have it, gives you reassurance, hope you won't need it, but if you do, what benefit it gives you. And the last thing, they said, additional fire stations and the cover that we have is like a gold-plated insurance or a Rolls-Royce. On deprivation, which is the last point I want to make, it's important to note, talking about London-wide cover, of the 100 most deprived wards in London, 76 of them will have an increase in the time taken for the first fire engine to arrive, and 76 of them will have an increase in fire appliances that arrive at an incident. So that tells you the picture. And it's also important to remember that this very document, London Safety Plan, clearly tells you that there is a link between fire and deprivation. And this is what we are talking about in areas like Woolwich. And therefore, it is plain daft to have proposals which actually affect fire services in those deprived areas.
I'm not going to go over points that have already been covered, but there's been something that's come up both in Councillor Shah's presentation earlier and in Mr. Duval's question about the idea that there's a 1p a day in terms of the Mayor's promise to, so I do apologise with Councillor Shah, which I think needs to be debunked, because the simple fact of the matter is that that 1p a day, whilst being a very good soundbite, is actually factually completely inaccurate. The fire brigade, as we've discussed, needs to make in the region of £45 million reduction in its running cost. So that's not a one-off £45 million saving. It needs to run at £45 million per year, less than it was doing previously. As has already been discussed, our initial guidance was that reduction would need to be £60 million a year reduction running costs. We renegotiated, the Commissioner and his top team put forward a very well argued position, and that means that reduction was reduced to the tune of £15 million per year, which goes to one of the points that, again, Councillor Shah made about the £50 million worth of fire and brigade reserves that we used to support the police in, let's remind ourselves, 2012 was one of the busiest years in terms of the policing requirement, both with Jubilee, the Olympics, the Paralympics, etc., etc. So that's why the money was taken across. In terms of when that money is coming back, it comes back every year. It comes back every year. The police, their proportion of the council tax take reduces from this year onwards. The London Fire Brigade's proportion of the council tax goes up by £8 million per year, and that will be an £8 million differential which gets delivered each and every year into the future. So the money is and will come back into the Fire Brigade's coffers. But going back to that 1p a day line, that will generate, as I say, £9 million a year. We need to reduce our running costs by £45 million a year, and if somehow you can turn £9 million into £45 million, I've got a job for you in our finance department, because the simple fact of the matter is that will not make this problem go away. And for people to sit here on the top table, people who know the figures inside out, to claim that 1p a day will make all these problems go away, I think it's deeply unfair, and it just refuses to address the real situation that we are presenting.
Thank you. The lady in the blue.
Thank you. I've done a little bit of snooping myself, good old Google, even though they don't pay their taxes. I looked on the Chief Officers Association page, and it started off with 3 quotes. One was, "Firefighters are the bravest of the brave," David Cameron, following the riots in major UK cities 2011. The second was, "The fire service are highly valued by the public and were praised for their dedication and contribution," Sir Michael Pitt, 2007, following the review of widespread flooding across the UK. The third and final one was, "No finer set of public services and public service in the world," and that was by our friend Tony Blair, who said that in 2005 following the terrorist bombing in London, which obviously proves that you don't just go to fires. However, I continued to read this and I found it quite enlightening, but it was so long because I'd just come back from St. Lucia Hospital meeting. The impact of austerity on English rescue services. It states in one part, "However," and this covers your fires, "however, the relationship between firefighters and the number of fires is not straightforward. Fewer fires does not directly equal fewer firefighters. We provide a service dependent on risk, not demand. While demand has fallen, risk remains and could increase given the impact the recession is having on households and lifestyles, and our service must provide resilience against this." There were many other remarks against the cut, so I find it quite strange that officers in the fire service, especially yourself, sir, are trying to convince me that by cutting back fire appliances, firefighters and stations is going to improve my life rather than make it more frightening. My father actually was in London Fire Brigade and he was an officer, and like yourself, sir, he went from fireman right through the ranks, and I applaud that in you. However, I didn't think you were here, because on looking again on Google, and I could be completely wrong, and I hope, I apologise if I am, but you're retired. You're not here. Apparently, you retired and went off in a nice lump and came back again in the same job. Not as a part-time file clerk or as an advisor, but straight back into the same job. Now, firefighters need to have confidence in the person who is leading them and trust. And it appeared from what I read, I could be wrong again, it was in the Daily Mail, which is a right-wing paper, so I'm surprised it's even in there, that you had resigned. It had all been slightly hush-hush, but the firefighters looked to you for trust. And this seemed to be not too trustworthy. They need your support. They need you to be fighting for them, not giving in to Boris Johnson, who, let's be honest, I know why he doesn't come after the Catford incident in St. Lucia Hospital. He is terrified of being like the old politicians, standing on soapboxes and having to answer a question. So this poor man, Mr. Cleverly, who, by the way, before he became the chair of London Fire and Emergency Planning, guess what he was in, which is really helpful for the London Fire Brigade, London Waste and Recycling Board. Now, what has that got to do with emergency service? What you have been told about the fire service, sir, is what they want to tell you. You've been in the job just under a year. This kicked off some time back. Now, 2 years ago, let's say 2 years ago, there had been a strike, right? 12 stations, 500 odd firefighters and 18 appliances stood down, you would be calling these firefighters all the names under the sun, they're putting people's lives at risk, etc., etc., calling the army in. That would have been 2 years ago. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay to close them all. I don't understand your reasoning. And I remember, and you're forgetting too, some very important people. I'm sorry, my mouse is right. Firefighters have partners. And I remember my mother telling me when I was older that she would fold her clothes by her bed in case she got a call to say that she would have to go because my dad had been on a shout and been injured or worse. You've got to look into the fact that the partners worry when their partners go off. They're going to be even more worried now that when they go down the underground, it doesn't have to be a bomb, it could be an electrical fault, and the firefighters go down while we're all coming up, because every single day they go to work, they go into the properties that are in danger. We don't, we get out, and we thank God we can. And the firefighter will be down there, there's dust, there's muck, there's debris, there's bodies, but he'll find someone, or she'll find someone that maybe she can save. She'll turn round, where's her backup? What do you do? I've saved, you keep on about this penny, all right? I've saved £2 a day on my council tax. What life, what price a life of a fireman and a civilian? I really don't want to hear any more about this rubbish about a penny or tons or £5. It is not anything to do with what you're trying to do. What you are trying to do is privatise, eventually, the London Fire Brigade. You know that, and so does the Commissioner know that. Then you're not stupid. And everything else has been privatised, so that is the only reason that I can see why we are having all this rubbish and trying to do this. And just a second. And we don't need a part-time fire service in a full-time city. Thank you.
Cliff Thompson, former London firefighter, BBC News journalist. Good to see everybody this evening. Commissioner, Chief Fire Officer, Chairman, Deputy Chairman, thank you for providing this opportunity. Particularly to Navin, I know you fought very, very hard to get to our meetings in every borough in London, so that every Londoner has the opportunity to speak. There's no London without a voice about this issue. So thank you for that. Commissioner, I wonder if you'll indulge me for a few moments while I just invoke Chatham House rules. I have to be able to speak as a Londoner first and foremost, if that's okay with you. My personal view is that I'm against the closure of any London fire station. London is full of rich history, diverse history. I want to mention a couple of stations outside the Greenwich area, the Woolwich area if I can. Clerkenwell, the oldest London operational fire station. Thought to be the oldest in the world by some people. Clerkenwell, a fantastic station. Clapham, fantastic station. Clapham resonates with me. I went to the Clapham train crash in 1988. We cut the last 4 bodies out of the wreckage of those trains. That resonates with me, Clapham. But obviously we're here in Greenwich, and like I say, this is my personal beliefs and my personal views, speaking as a Londoner. I just want you, Commissioner, just to answer a very simple question. If you was to go back a week in time and substitute a machete with a dirty bomb, would you see that attendance times are important then? Would you sit here and say that attendance times weren't important? I was on that cordon for 3 days, BBC News. I have to say it's one of the most shocking things I've ever seen in my entire career. I'm a veteran of 9 major incidents. 9. It's too many for me. Way too many. Every life that lost is one life too many. There's been a lot of apologising to Boris, apologising to government, apologising to various fire ministers. I would ask you, Commissioner and Chief Fire Officer, respectfully, to show some leadership and go to the government and to say, please don't do this. Inner London is strategically too important. Woolwich is too important. This whole area, all of the Inner London fire stations are way too important. I don't look at bar graphs. I haven't stopped being a firefighter. If this building blew up in the next few minutes, I'll be the first one in there, and you know that, Chief Fire Officer, because you and I started in the same place. You started as a firefighter and worked your way through the ranks. My career was ended by a very tragic death, but I'll save that story for another time. It involves the death of a child. I think London is the greatest city in the world. It's a fantastic capital city. The London Fire Brigade has a rich history. It's Southwark. I was at the museum this afternoon. It's a great place to go when you want to think about this job and how it gets to you. Go and sit in the museum. Have a little think, cup of tea, talk to some old colleagues, work it all out in your mind. It's a great place. Why not just ring fence Winchester House? Why not ring fence Clerkenwell? It's the oldest operational fire station in the world, and you want to, or you're proposing to close this up. It beggars belief. Would they do that in New York? No. What they do in New York is they have volunteer fire stations, volunteer firefighters. We don't have that in this country. We have pride and integrity, and you should be proud, sir, of your fire service, and you should stand up for it. Every penny, every fire station, every firefighter. Thank you, sir.
Lady on the third row in the middle here.
Hello. What we haven't heard a lot about tonight is Woolwich and what it actually looks like. And I think you need to go to Woolwich, and I'm more than welcome. Anybody who wants to come and visit, I'll take them around. Woolwich is, the fire station is stuck between the Blackwall Tunnel and the Woolwich Ferry. So there are some mornings when you can't actually move your car, and I couldn't possibly think of how you'd get a fire engine around. It's quite important because the other things that happen in Woolwich are things like Run to the Beat, the London Marathon, we have events, and one day Charlton Football team might get back into the Premiership, and that will also have an impact on actually services moving around our streets and our houses. You've asked us to look at this consultation in the round and not just concentrate on our own fire station, but what this consultation doesn't do is take the whole cuts of our emergency services in the round. We've taken policemen off of our streets, we're closing Lewisham A&E and putting more pressure on ambulance men and other services. We need to know that somebody somewhere, hopefully in the GLA, maybe in the government, is looking at our communities and where we live and looking at the big impact that these little 1,000 cuts are going to have. In terms of Woolwich, when you look at the houses around the fire station, they're actually high density, they are normally multi-occupancy, and there's a very high turnover of residents. The reason that you don't have so many fire incidences around there, or the number is declining, is because you have wonderful fire officers. I don't know any of these chaps down here, but I do know Junior, who works at the fire station, and he goes out to local schools and to community groups, and he comes out with a fire engine, and he tells us what to do in a chip pan fire. Well, actually, it's a samosa fire around Woolwich, but that's another story. What is very, very important is that if you cut 520 firemen across London, you will not have the capacity to go out and talk to people and talk to the local community. The reason we like Woolwich Fire Station is it's because our community fire station, and you can walk in and you can talk to people and you can know who are there. And that's the same with all of our fire stations. It's actually the same with our safer neighbourhood teams. There's a real community feel in Woolwich, and it's wonderful, and you can see the results of that in how we stick together and strive together. And knowing my fireman's name is very, very important to me. I think that the question I suppose I want you to ask is that you go back to the Mayor, and I think this is a question for you, James, and look at the cuts in the round, but also take a look at what that impact would be. You know and I know that in deprived areas, you don't just go to a house once and you tell them what the importance of the grills on the windows are, or how to manage a fire, or how to escape from a building. If you look at Lucknow House and what happened there, it's important when we have a high turnover and a high density in high communities, that you go again and you go again and you keep getting that message out. Cutting these people, cutting these fire engines means you will not have the capacity to keep going to these houses, into these communities and telling us what to do. And we need that information, because otherwise we're going to see incidents and deaths increase. Thank you very much.
You raised a number of points. I'll try and cover them all off. The quotes that you made from the Chief Fire Officer's website, I don't disagree with any of them. Absolutely don't disagree with any of them. Well, but it's true. I mean, but by the same token, none of those things mean that we shouldn't or mustn't indeed look at savings where savings can be made. As I say, we've got a necessity, but we've also got an opportunity, and none of this is a punishment for firefighters. It's not an indication that I or the Mayor or anyone thinks less of firefighters than they deserve. That's absolutely not the case. But we have to make the budget balance. You go on to make a very valid point about that. This isn't about demand; it's about risk. And you're absolutely right. This is a risk-based proposal, because if it was about demand, as we've already discussed, over the last decade or so, the demand has reduced dramatically in terms of many aspects of what we do, both fire and other services. The demand has reduced enormously. Now that is good news, because a reduction in demand means London is a safer place. But Madam, please. Madam, please.
I didn't make it up.
Let her talk.
I promise. Google it.
Madam, let me finish my answer. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. The point I'm saying is that demand has reduced enormously. We are not, and have not, and will not propose reducing the fire brigade to match that reduction in demand.
But how do you get fire prevention?
Madam, please, I will
going
Madam,
when you've got men at fire?
please let me finish the answer. If there's things I've missed, pull me up on them, okay? As we've seen over the last decade or so, demand has nearly halved. And in that time, as we've discussed, not a single fire station, not a single firefighter or a single appliance has been reduced over that same period of time. Indeed, the total numbers have remained the same. There's one that went under a Labour administration.
I'm not interested in Labour, Tory, please.
Can I answer the question, please?
This is a public meeting. I don't want to hear about politics.
No,
Just stick to the argument.
Okay, thank you. So the point I'm making is that the fire brigade has decentralised somewhat, because the station that closed was Centre in Westminster, and the new station opened was in Outer London, because actually there was a big gap in our coverage. So we move our assets, we move our appliances, our fire stations to where the risk is, and therefore it is a risk-based plan. You mentioned about the Commissioner retired. I think, I don't know whether the Commissioner feels comfortable discussing. I'm going to put this, my view is that, and I'll say this in general terms, I am incredibly proud to have both Ron Dobson, but also the other senior members of the London Fire Brigade here in London, because he is absolutely an exemplary public servant, and I will absolutely not take an inch away from that position. Without a shadow of a doubt, I should say the decades of experience that he has got has made and will continue to make London an infinitely safer place than were he not in the position he's in. Like everybody else's.
Would you, excuse me, you could say that I could put my foot in as well.
If I can complete, and then pull me up on
I
anything.
don't want this.
Madam, sorry, please, you let the
Okay, so if you promise
and then you can come
not
back
to
and
start putting up other hands, I would like to answer what you are.
You suggested that the firefighters need to have confidence in their commission. The point I would make is that I have absolutely no doubt that we have the best fire commissioner in the country.
What do the firefighters think?
And if they don't, they should do. If they don't, they should do. You asked about my experience. Yes, before this job, I did come from the London Waste Recycling Authority, but I've also been.
I know you're in the TA. I saw that as well. Before you started.
Madam, it's not just I've been in the TA. It's not just that I've been in the TA. I've been in the armed forces both regular and part-time for over 20 years, including periods of working in UK resilience, where emergency planning was a core function of what I did. I am also the chairman of the London Resilience Forum, which is about the collaborative working of emergency services. So the idea that I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry, I completely dispute that. And finally, the point that you made about privatisation, I will say this now, and I will say this as many times as I need to say it to convince people, that there is absolutely no agenda to attempt to privatise the London Fire Brigade or any other. And I'll tell you for why. One, because as someone that left school to join the uniformed public service, I don't believe the private sector could deliver what the London Fire Brigade delivers. Also, in case that doesn't convince you, why on earth would the private sector want to take on board this particular job? There is no money in it. There's
Subsidies.
No profit to be made from it. There's no profit to be made from it.
Millions of pounds in subsidies.
Virgin are going to make money out of the health service. Nobody shout and still make money out of.
Madam, our budget is being reduced by 45 million. Why would someone want to buy into a service that is getting these budget squeeze, that is dangerous?
You've done the same to the railways. You reduced it
People have to put lives at
and
risk.
privatised
This
it.
is not the kind of sector that the private sector would want to involve in. You may well not be convinced by that. I'm quite sure that I'm not going to be able to convince you here this evening, but I can give you this cast-iron guarantee. There is no desire to privatise the London Fire Brigade.
Right, well, you waffle on so much, just like me, obviously. It's difficult to remember what you have said.
Madam, sorry.
I don't want to waste all any ideas. The fire commissioner, obviously, I admire him. You went right through the ranks and got where you did. You did come in as a university graduate and became an officer. But what I cannot understand, sir, is that you have been a fireman, you've been a sub-officer, a station officer, and so on. Where did you decide along the line that it was a good idea to cut back on the fire service? Because the camaraderie that your men and women now, which is wonderful, have, when did you decide that what you are saying is a good idea to cut back? Because money talks. I'm not saying you are in receipt of money or anything. I'll be looking at just a minute. I will, yes, but I don't want to lie to myself. But I will be looking at the New Year's honours list because we do know that the Commissioner of Police automatically gets a knighthood normally, and he's got it. But you have to wait around if you're a chief officer or commissioner now to see if you'll get it. You've got an OBE or some EE, whatever it was. But that is the only conclusion I can come to.
Thank you, Madam. Councillor John.
Yeah, couple of contributions have picked up a very important issue about emergency services as a whole. Very clearly, we've seen police service with more than half of London's police stations under threat of closure. That's actually a plan of the Mayor of London. We have situation where the safer neighborhood teams will be pretty much gone. Okay. Second, well, I did not. 2,500 I did not interrupt you. Can I have my say? Show some courtesy. No, don't interrupt me there. The point is, look, people are not here for this kind of bickering. You have made your point. I'm making my point. Have courtesy. Accident emergency, again under siege. Well, you guys are fighting for A&E at Lewisham, in my patch, I'm fighting against closure of Ealing and the Middlesex, Central Middlesex as well. When it comes to fire services, it's exactly the same situation. Got closure program, something which is important to remember. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we already cut 66 million pounds. Our reserves, which were around 80 million of the Fire Authority, are down to absolute minimum at virtual risk level. So we have done all the cutting. Now we are talking about frontline services being hit, our safety being put at risk. And this is what it's all about. And this is why here tonight, not only about Woolwich, but safety of all of Londoners. And this is where, to me, the whole program is plain daft and not acceptable. Thank you.
All right, to ask questions. So I won't answer the personal question. I don't think this meeting's supposed to be about me, to be honest.
No, it was just
But in
something
truth,
I noticed.
everything that happened in my circumstances is in the public domain. That's why you managed to find it on Google. So I don't think it's been
Google's a
hush-hush.
wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The residents of Greenwich going to say anything? It's all councillors and ask people from Lewisham. Is anybody from Greenwich going to speak?
I think there's a couple of points that are important though in relation to what the lady raised, and also some other speakers that I think just need to be touched upon as well. I absolutely agree with you in terms of what's on the Chief Fire Association website. It's interesting to note that the Chief Fire Officers that are actually responsible for running that, the President and others, are actually Chief Fire Officers who reduced the size of their brigades quite significantly in the last few years due to cuts in their funding. So one thing on that side, but actually doing something different in your own brigades. Well, I think it's important, but also the other thing which I think is really important to know is that the Audit Commission back in 2010, and again a report released by the most recent Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor to the government, just released a report saying that due to the number of incidents reduced in England, we should be reducing the number of fire rescue services, the number of firefighters and fire stations, almost proportionately. These plans that we've got at the moment are nowhere near proportionate, and I absolutely agree that the fire rescue service is an insurance policy, and that's why, despite the fact the number of fire incidents has gone down by a third, we're not recommending to reduce the size of the brigade by anything like a third. It's less than 10% in fact. So I think London is very different to the rest of the country. We approach cuts in London very differently. I'm actually very proud of my record in the last 5 years since I've been Commissioner. This is the first time that changes to the front line have been brought on the table at all, despite the fact that we made quite a lot of savings in the past, when £66 million, as I've said, without touching fire stations. So the government and others, other reports, would actually have us go much further than we're proposing to go. I don't think that would be safe, and therefore we stand as we are.
You speak so quickly. If I could, if we could just one talking and maybe a bit slower, and you write a few things down, I might be able to understand it. But it's statistics. I'm looking on 10 years, I get tired.
Just coming back to the gentleman up there in terms of the question policy raised, if that incident had been a dirty bomb in Woolwich, then obviously probably attendance times would be important. But actually, if that had been a dirty bomb in Woolwich, we'd have been dealing with the incident from fire and rescue service resources from across the whole of London, potentially from outside London. So the initial attempt would have been important, but actually it's the longer term deal that is more important. And we'd have been much more than just into the first attendance time.
Very briefly respond to that point. It's just that the issue came up about armed response vehicles, and it's a story that had to be involved on Thursday, and it was an issue, and the ARDs were there very, very quickly. It's part of the perception of that. And I think, you said long and hard, fire stations, community fire safety work is important. You need fire stations at the heart of the community, so firefighters can go out with smoke alarms, meet the public, something can kill over, they'll do outside fire.
You mentioned volunteers, and there's something about volunteers that I think, interestingly, the Fire Brigade Union and I can agree on, that we don't think volunteers are a very good idea in terms of London Fire Brigade. I think London deserves a professional fire service, which is whole time, and that's why there's no proposal in the plan for any other type of crewing system. It's all going to be whole time, so I think that's the right way to go. And London doesn't deserve volunteers, although they do a very good job in other places. Going back to the lady in the front there, in terms of traffic congestion and others, in terms of traffic congestion, there's traffic congestion in various places all over London, as we know, and it's the same issue been raised in all of these other boroughs. Our modelling does take account of traffic congestion, because the modelling uses incident data from the last 5 years, and therefore for when there's been traffic congestion due to a whole range of circumstances. That is taken into account in relation to predictions around travel time to get to incidents. Also, things like the London Marathon have specific plans in place across London, because these things will always take place in London. We're a major capital city, a world city, and things like the London Marathon and other events will take place. We have to have specialist contingency plans in place for those, when we do, and we maximise our ability to respond via those contingency plans. And in terms of the CFS work that firefighters do, absolutely, I absolutely agree that our community safety work is extremely important. Actually, it's the community safety work and the education of the public through local authorities and others that's largely been responsible for the reduction in fire deaths and injuries. Because actually what's interesting, very important, I think, is that in relation to the years, the last 10 years where fire deaths and numbers of fires gone down specifically very significantly, we haven't reduced or increased the number of fire stations or firefighters in London, but we have started doing an awful lot more fire safety work. But the fact of the matter is, as the number of incidents fall, our utilisation rates fall still further. 7% is a very low utilisation rate, so I believe there is still the capacity in the brigade, still plenty of capacity in the brigade after these proposals to actually continue doing the same amount of community fire safety across London.
Thank you. I'll just remind everybody the maximum opportunity to ask the questions and get the broadest range of views possible. Please, Madam, fourth row, yellow card.
Councillor Barwick, I'm actually a representative of the Greenwich Riverside ward. I am a Greenwich resident and I actually live in the ward. Much of what I was going to say has been picked up by other people, but really I just wanted to say Greenwich Riverside as a ward is the biggest in Greenwich, Lewisham or Bexley, and it's getting bigger because there's just been planning agreed for 2,000-3,000 more homes and more coming on board, and that's along the river side. So we are not talking about a population that has increased but is going to not increase by more, but by much more. We are looking at a substantial increase in the population over a few years. One of the previous speakers mentioned the congestion, and Ron Dobson said that this is taken into account. But I wonder whether you've actually taken into account the fact that the Woolwich ferry has been allowed to deteriorate quite a bit over the last few years, with the result that more often than not there is only a one-boat service. If there is congestion in the Blackwall Tunnel, then there is a knock-on effect. And although most parts of London during rush hour will have congestion somewhere, around the Woolwich ferry it is almost impossible to get through, sometimes at 12 o'clock daytime, simply because there is so much traffic that is get there. Now, if we take away the Woolwich fire station, and tenders are expected to come from Plumstead, as was said in the report about the issue on the March the 15th. Those fire tenders are going to have to, by and large, come along the Plumstead Road through along to the Woolwich ferry, if they are going to be seen to an incident in the north of the borough, in the Woolwich Riverside area. And believe me, there is no way through. If they're stuck there, they are stuck, because nothing moves. And so I'm really concerned that the people who live in the estates around the Woolwich fire station at the moment are really going to suffer if there is a problem, because if they come through from East Greenwich, you can just about get there, but if they're being asked to come through from Plumstead at any time, they are likely to get stuck completely.
Thank you, Madam. Sir, at the front of the auditorium.
Probably might as well heard that. Sorry, but I have got several points. First of all, the councillors and the other people have not given you, can you hear me? Yes. Have not given you all the figures. There are nearly 4,000 new dwellings to be built on Woolwich Riverside within the next 5 years. You also have emergency possibilities with the DLR, because at the moment it's brand new and you've had no problems with it, but you will get problems with it. You've now got the crossrail coming, again a tunnel system, which could have great problems. You're going to have at least 2 new river crossings, probably a tunnel and probably a bridge, which again, one of those will be in Riverside. And also the population of the borough is going to increase by 50% by 2032. 50% increase in the population of the whole borough. That's Boris's figures. Ask him. Next thing is, I'm sorry. Right. The false calls. There ought to be a much more concerted effort on tracing false calls, getting the police's help to actually prosecute and stop the 999 hoax calls. It's been going on too long. You've already admitted that half your calls are hoax calls. Do something about it. Don't just talk about it. Don't accept it. One more thing I'll bring up on that. Oh, by the way, privatisation. They privatised the ambulance service and lost 43% of its capacity. But they have NHS trusts, ambulance services have been privatised. The police have been partly privatised, and they've had, oh come on, PCSOs, etc. Neighbourhood SNTs, they're being reduced from 7 people to 2 in most wards. Little things like that, which you've skated over, but they're facts. There is only one more question. You're reducing your firefighters by 14%, more or less. Yes? Are you also going to reduce the number of officers above the rank of station commander? That means the ones with the little white things on, the little, no, you're a station officer, aren't you? Station commander. Yeah. No, that's what I mean, that's what I'm saying. We're talking about the Lorette thing. Are you going to reduce them by 14% as well? I think that'll do for now. If I can open answer all those questions, I'll be obliged. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, yeah. I just wanted to say I'm not a councillor, just to reassure the lady there. I just... Sorry?
We thought you was a councillor.
I think I just wanted to say that I'm a resident of Woolwich Riverside, and some of the statistics and things that have come out tonight, I'm actually really concerned for my family. Alongside the police cuts, and these kind of response time, 2 minutes I think it's talked about, and then Councillor Shah mentioned that that fires can quadruple in that time, and that's deeply disturbing to me. I think that's sort of quite an upsetting thing I've learned from this evening. And I think basically I just can't believe there's no alternative to this. I just find I struggle to understand why the budgets that were agreed before weren't done, and these cuts have to be made. You mentioned sort of Mr. Cleverley there about the having to make cuts. You say we have to make this, we have to do this, when clearly people have said here that you didn't have to do that. That's the takeaway I've got from it anyway.
You don't have to.
And I think basically, and just in terms of the Commissioner, in terms of your modelling, I just hope it's kind of more reliable than sort of they're using financial services and things like that, because that's obviously not. It's quite disturbing. But that's my sort of point. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, people at the back, please. Followed by the gentleman in the black shirt.
Good evening. My name's Paul Richardson. I'm not a councillor. Anything for a bit of applause. But I am an officer of Greenwich and Bexley Trade Union Council, which has got a number of affiliates. Sorry? It's got a number of affiliates, and many of them work around the Woolwich Fire Station. And obviously,
the trade union council as opposed to the closure of any fire stations whatsoever and the sacking of any firefighters. We have many people working there in large buildings. We have teachers with, some of them over 1,000 students there. So therefore there's considerable concern about the future safety. And I also, as an individual, live in one of the 2 wards that are mentioned as being the most hit, one of the 2 Woolwich wards. I've been to too many consultation meetings because I went to a number of them over the hospitals, which was fairly depressing. And in those meetings, you get a top panel that thinks their proposals are fantastic, and an audience that think they're terrible. And that's it. That's what happens in those things. I'm sick and tired of hearing the situation where the underlying thing is a financial necessity. Okay, this meeting's in the wrong part of the borough. But the one thing you can see from the borough, if you go that way, is the shining brightness of Canary Wharf. This is one of the richest cities in the world. One of the richest cities in the world, and it is unable to maintain its fire services at the moment. The statistics that you've got on there that show, a fall in demand, a fire service doesn't operate like that. I mean, the point of the matter is, what does that show? It shows it's been successful. It also doesn't show that there are tremendous necessity for using the fire service at particular moments in time. It's not something that runs smoothly. So I used to teach, did business, doesn't run smoothly. It can have tremendous peaks and troughs. So that's one point I'd make, that you cannot base it on these general trends. Very dangerous position. The other thing I'd say, looking at the statistics, is that we have these response times. Now, I'm not an expert on these things at all, but the first thing that came into my head when I looked at the response times, I thought, well, yeah, okay, these are response times. A fire happens or an incident happens and the fire engines are sent out. But what if there's 2 incidents at the same time? Is that taken into account in those circumstances? If there's 2 incidents at the same time, does that affect response times? I didn't see anything there. So therefore, you've got to take that into account. The great density, that's been referred to in Woolwich, has been talked about before. Woolwich Central, 950 units. 2,100 units in Riverside by the old power station. That's just gone through. These are all the things. And the last thing I'd say, which was, I found quite amusing in a way, because I thought from the top table, I think it was the chief officer, is it? I'm not sure, stated that that the audit commission, and I think it was the treasurer, he said, looked at the statistics, looked at the fall in the number of incidents, and said we should cut it appropriately. And I think that actually, if you think of the statistician's mind, the person in the treasury or in the audit commission, that's an incredible condemnation of their ability to actually look at the fire service, to look at something specifically as it is. Because, is that what they're doing all over? I mean, are they doing that with Louis Germain? They just look at it and say, well, yeah, that does it. You're not too bothered that QE's bursting at the seams or whatever. That's how it's the numbers. It's not the numbers, it's the actual reality of what happens on the ground. So all I can say is, those are 2 questions. If 2 things happen at the same time, what's the score? And the other thing, that would be the main question I would ask. And just to finish off is to say that, certainly us as part representatives of local unions in the area completely oppose the closure of Woolwich and the closure of all the fire stations and the redundancies. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gordon Field and I'm from the Fire Brigade Union, London Region, Regional Chair. The Fire Brigade Union represents 95% of the UK's firefighters and operational control staff. I'd like to start by raising some issues that certainly we as the Fire Brigade Union have with the data that's been proposed or been put forward by the Commissioner and the Principal Officers. our statisticians have been doing crunchy numbers, as many of the others. And I'd just like to start on a local point, and I think it's quite important for the people of Greenwich. The proposed changes that the Commissioner intends to make, particularly in Greenwich, would see that the 47.2% of the first attendance times in the borough would not be met by the 6-minute target attendance time that the Commissioner and the Fire Authority are suggesting should be met. Now those are your statistics, those are by ward basis if you go through those, and I think that's a very telling thing. And I think the Greenwich Council needs to take that point up with the Commissioner and find out why those statistics say that. Yeah, it says in his presentation with the big blue chart up there that Greenwich is fine, it's going to meet its attendance times overall, because that doesn't seem to read to me. The second thing I'd like to raise with you, Commissioner, is the period of time that you keep talking about, this 10-year reduction. Now, for some reason, your statistics, and you use, and I'm also using one of the right-wing think tanks, I think Mr. Cleverly, for this information as well, that the first London safety plan from our fire authority was in 2004. So why do you keep quoting data from 2001 and 2002 when you know, and it's recorded in one of your bits of data, that it's unreliable evidence in supporting something in one area, yet in all the other areas you fail to mention that in your documentation, and that includes all the supplements from 1 to 23. But I'd also like to point out to the audience that the Mayor, the Chair of the Fire Authority, and much of the Conservative members of the Fire Authority have been putting much of the reverence for this on the Commissioner's professional judgment. Yet 3 years ago, LSP4, the Audit Commission, criticised the Fire Authority, and the Commissioner made a professional judgment and made a very clear statement to suggest that in his professional need, the Fire Authority could not make any further cuts, and he was happy with the level of standards that they were. So I think, like many others, including all the firefighters in London, really wants to know how you changed your mind over that, and the fact that the truth of the matter is that this LSP plan or integrated tourism plan is based around finances and nothing more, and therefore it brings into the politics that others have suggested not in place, but they are. Then I want to ask you again about the data, and I move on to the document titled, excuse me a second, I'm just going through that, it's important I get it right. Getting to emergency incidents, supplement 8, I believe. If you look at the information in there, you look at the periods of time, you use statistics that go back to 1970. They go 5-year periods, 75, 80, 85, and then they jump to this magic figure of 2001 and go up year by year by year. And if you look at the data in there, you add the totals up and it comes to figures. Yet, when you look at your other data in the supplement version 3, the data then gives a completely different set of statistics and different dates around picking and choosing what you think is right and what you think is wrong. Now clearly, you've suggested, and I've noticed that you've changed your presentation tonight, that there are been reductions in fires in London. Well, when you look at the total number of fires, and you add them up in there, in the last 4 years, there hasn't been this massive reduction. In fact, another statistic, particularly in Woolwich, in one of the boroughs, there has been an increase of calls from 112 the previous to 421, and that is at the most in risk area in the Woolwich Riverside area. Again, a factor that should be taken into account on those things, but doing fire risk assessments by using statistics, which is basically what's been achieved here and been done, goes to show that there is no professional judgment, it's just pure mathematics. And I think as firefighters in London, who I represent, are appalled by these plans. They do not agree with them, and we would support all the opposition parties and the judgment of the Fire Authority, who have rejected this plan 3 times. It was only the fact that the Mayor, Boris Johnson, overruled the Fire Authority and again chose that. So I say in some respects we should praise the Fire Authority for rejecting this because they've seen through it, and the Mayor perhaps should listen to the people he's asked to make their judgment. Thank you.
Okay, and there's a lot of points there. I know I've got to speak, so I'll go through as quick as I can. I think in terms of Riverside Woolwich Walk, we've heard a lot of comments tonight about the population increase and also in relation to the increase in buildings in that area. This is a consultation, we'll take that away, we'll go back and we'll have a look at that for you. So thank you very much for making those comments. I'm not going to try and go through all the issues about how we do the planning again because probably the time is getting on too far, but we will, it's a consultation, we'll make note of those comments and we'll look at Woolwich Riverside Walk for you. In terms of the Woolwich Ferry, we are aware of the difficulties with the Woolwich Ferry. We don't plan on the basis of the Woolwich Ferry being available, we plan on across the whole of the 5-year period. We will of course have another look at that for you in terms of the issue. Now those are actually issues that have been raised with the chairman himself by the local MP, face to face and in writing. So they're already even as part of the consultation specifically of Woolwich in that area in terms of traffic congestion and the Woolwich Ferry issue with the local tunnel. So you can take it and we'll re-look at those issues and you'll see that will be considered at least in the part of the plan that comes up later. So to the gentleman over here in terms of a range of things there, you mentioned a range of issues in terms of additional transport systems effectively, so river crossings, Crossrail, DLR. We are aware of developments of those and we're working with the people who develop those systems to actually make sure that those are safe as they can be. But we are aware of those and they have been.
Sorry, I did mention all of those are underground.
Yes, yes we are. Yes we are. Yes we are. We're aware of all of that. In terms of false alarms and hoax calls, actually when I say false alarms, I mean false alarms due to caused by automatic fire alarms in buildings at high levels. The actual hoax call problem is one that we've been working on for a number of years and we have been taking really proactive steps to try to prosecute people that make false alarms. We cut off, we get people with mobile phones cut off if they make false alarms. So we've really been working very hard at reducing that. Borough commanders locally we do a lot around that, but I'm really talking more about automatic fire alarms in buildings rather than that's what we're proposing to do. In terms of officer reduction, I think you didn't actually see all the presentation, I think you came in slightly late. We are proposing to reduce officer numbers, and actually we're proposing to reduce officer numbers by more than 14% in the plan.
In that case, I can reduce the senior officer by more than 14%.
That's what I'm talking about, officers above the station officer, we're talking about reducing by significantly more than 14%. Sorry, me?
Yeah, your success.
Oh, I've got no who that's going to be.
Yeah, but that's you and me. So,
well, okay. We'll take that away as a consultation response. Thank you. Okay. We mentioned Riverside again, but the gentleman over here. The modelling work, yeah, I'm confident the modelling work is much better than using financial services. We've used it over a number of years, and actually the predictions that the modelling gave us, when we're back to those, actually they worked out to be extremely accurate across wide areas of London. And in fact, in most cases, actually, the actual response is quicker than modelling work. So I'm very confident about that. Due by number of and by the services, so yeah, I'm confident it's much better than we've seen in the financial services sector. Coming on to the gentleman asked about 2 calls at once. Well, of course, 2 calls at once happens now, and always has done and always will do. And if a fire engine is not available due to being on another call, it could be doing a home stuff, it could be doing a visit where it's not available, it could be doing training where it's not available, and we mobilise the fire engine from the nearest fire engine other than that one. We do that now, and we continue to do that in the future. That's the way we always manage it. We will still do exactly the same thing. In terms of, coming back to Gordon, the statistics, we've spoken about the statistics many times, and I'm not surprised if I get you wanting to question the statistics. I would be doing exactly the same thing if I was in their position. However, we are confident of the statistics, and actually we're very happy to sit down and go through the detail. So, we actually, the statistics was looked at by Professor Steinberg from the London School of Economics, actually, as part of the 6 Boroughs meeting last month. And also we met with him, we've also met with him separately since then. And actually his description of the statistics and the work that we've done and all the modelling is that he thought it was superb, the best that he's seen. So actually, yes, we have that object, and we're happy to talk to him outside the meeting. Coming on to the Audit Commission, and this is the point I made earlier about what the Audit Commission said, there's absolutely no inconsistency with what I said in 2010 and what I'm saying now. The Audit Commission in 2010 proposed that the brigade should proportionally reduce its resources because of the proportional reduction of fires. And I said I didn't think that was a safe thing to do, and I'm saying exactly the same thing now. What the proposals in this plan that are not proportionate in relation to reduction in fires and incidents in London, nowhere near proportionate to it. However, the work that's been done has now been done properly, and therefore the proposals that we're making are confident about. The Audit Commission had done no background work. They simply said the fires have come down, therefore it should be down to one fire station to firefighters by the same amount. And I objected to that because I thought it was wrong, and I stand by exactly the same point. So I see no inconsistency in terms of my position then and now at all.
I think that's covered most of the points. I've got nothing really useful to add. I'm just keen to crack on with you.
Chair, I want to comment on London's growth. Since the 2011 census figures, there have been projections for London's growth, which are quite staggering. This is a piece of work we just started looking at in City Hall to see what it will mean in terms of humongous numbers, not just with the need for additional housing, but infrastructure, including school places, so on and so forth. Now, all of that with very high density. If you were going to accommodate that level of substantial growth within London. Now, that is going to give you an entirely different equation as to how the services operate, particularly emergency services in this instance. And this is where I don't believe that the current proposals that we have will actually serve London in terms of maintaining safety. And this is an issue which I don't believe modelling has quite clearly looked at in conjunction of projections over 25 years and so on. One last point, if I may return to, which is about fire stations. They are a community hub. When you have a fire station, with that comes not only firefighters and fire engine, but also it is prevention strategy. And this is why it is not simply a matter of disposing of brick and mortar. It is about having that community hub, particularly in deprived areas like Woolwich. They have a special place because that is where you have your preventative measures reactivated even at greater sort of intensity than other areas. And therefore, it is wrong to remove those fire stations which belong to the community, and therefore it's wrong solution.
Councillor, we've got time for one more rapid round, please. If you keep questions as brief as possible. Any final questions, please, before we wrap up the questions? Okay, thank you.
Nigel Fletcher, I'm another councillor. I'm deputy leader of the Conservative group on the council. But I'm not going to apologise for being a councillor, actually, because I think I thank the members of the public that have been here this evening. But I think, as others have said, if this meeting had been held in Woolwich, we'd have had substantially larger numbers of members of the public here. And for those who haven't been able to come along, I think it is important that local councils are here and are here in force. Particularly, as I say, I'm actually a Conservative councillor. I'm not a Woolwich councillor, I'm not a Greenwich councillor. I'm actually a councillor from Elton. But this is an issue that touches on the whole borough, and it's not one that is about party politics. And as the Conservative group locally, we have said that we do oppose the closure of Woolwich Fire Station. And we've done so for reasons which have been well described earlier, most notably the fact that there is clearly going to be an issue with substantial increases in population on Woolwich Riverside and other areas of the borough. But if you look at the figures for increases and projections, we can't see how this stacks up numerically. And I'm pleased to hear the Commissioner say that as a response is going to be taken away and looked at. And I hope that is a serious look at that, because, as I say, we seriously can't see how these numbers can stack up. And I think if this plan is to be challenged on anything, it's got to be challenged on the figures. And I hope that's something that is taken very seriously indeed. So that's my first question, is that how robust are those projections, and is it a serious offer to take those away and challenge the fundamentals of that? And secondly, I think a point which is related to that, a lot of the development alongside the river is going to be high-rise developments. I didn't see anything in the presentation there about platforms and capacity for fighting fire at height, and that's obviously something which will be of considerable concern to people.
Thank you. The gentleman just behind you. Last question down here.
Hi, Aidan Smith, citizen of Greenwich. On the consultation form that you've handed out, it says on the back page that it needed to be returned by 5 p.m. yesterday. Am I assuming that the consultation is still open?
Yes, it is. There's an additional piece of paper attached to it that amends that. So
right.
That should have been on your table also. Okay, I'll come back to the point in a second. I think the final questions down here at the front, lady with the blue polo.
I'm Dr. Smith, sorry, I'm a councillor, but I live in Woolwich. I've been in Woolwich for a long time. My question is that there was some argument earlier going on between you two about whether it's a penny or not a penny, and I don't quite understand that, frankly. But what I do recall in one of those first slides that was put up, which was one of the justifications for having to bring down the budget and close fire stations, and one of the bullet points was that the Mayor wanted to reduce council tax across London over the next how many years. So clearly that's one of the considerations. I think it is an issue. The question I would ask would that we not go back to the Mayor and say it is an issue of priorities, isn't it? It is an issue of, do we want to keep police and fire services fully staffed and serving the capital city of this country, or do we want to fund things like the cable car over by the O2? There are a number of things that the public, and I do consider myself a member of the public, might care to have a view on. That are those the priorities that we like our money spent on, or would we like them spent on preserving life and limb of people that live in this capital city? Because I think everybody here believes that's what we should be doing. And we understand the government's cutting money, but we actually expect the Mayor of London to take a very strong view to fight for London, to fight for the resources for London. And I live in Woolwich, and I'm not trying to make mileage of what's happened this week, but what's happened this week has kind of hit everybody that lives in this borough, that lives in this country. And had it been another sort of atrocity, as we said earlier, heaven knows how we would cope with that. I don't think we've seen the end of it. People are going to descend on us. It might get nasty. All sorts of things might happen. What we do know is that we need the police, and we need the fire services, and we need to feel safe in our homes. And we need to understand that actually the Mayor of London and those who are supposed to be running London for us understand that that's what Londoners want.
Thank you. Those last questions, Chairman.
Nigel, you made the on your fundamental questions to echo some of the concerns about the development. I know there is always a massive amount of cynicism with regard to public consultations, and that is unfortunate. I can only say that with regards to this consultation, genuinely, we will look seriously at the responses we put forward. This is a risk-based plan. I know again that always brings with it to be a cynicism, but it does have to come within budget. So I'm not going to make any hollow promises that we can suddenly pull rabbits out of the hat and come up with easy solutions, because whatever we come up with has got to fit within budget. But the planning that we put forward was based on certain priorities and certain assumptions. The whole point of this consultation is for Londoners to say whether they agree with those priorities and those assumptions. Now, if through this consultation people come back to us and say to us, actually, we think you've given too much emphasis to decentralising attendance times and not enough emphasis on population growth, population densities. If that is the consensus, then we will look again and that may come up with a slightly different set of proposals. But I can absolutely guarantee you that we will look at this, and we will take the views on board very, very seriously. And you made the point about prioritisation. I think the simple fact of the matter is that we, just like the police, just like other parts of the emergency services, the bulk of our funding comes directly from central government. The mayor's proportion of expenditure on the fire brigade has gone up. The fire brigade typically took about £120 million in the last few years, £120 million a year, as from the council tax precept. From this financial year onwards, that's projected to be at 128 million. So his proportion of the income to the fire brigade has gone up. The central government proportion has come down dramatically, and we have to respond to that. And you're right, it is about prioritisation. It absolutely is about prioritisation. I completely get that. But ultimately, and it goes back to the point that was made about when the fire brigade reserves were used to support the police. The hard work of the fire brigade, from senior officer level through to at the coalface firefighters, riding on pumps, based at stations, has made a massive impact in reducing the number and reducing the risk of fire in London, and that is an undeniable good thing. That has meant that when we put forward our respective cases about the use of public funding, that organisations like the London Ambulance Service, who have seen their demand increase massively, organisations like the police, who haven't seen anything like the reduction in incidents that we've seen, when they sit around the table with me and they put their cases forward for public funding, they put forward a very compelling case. And from a moral point of view, it's a lot harder for me to say, actually, I know my demand is going down, I know that our firefighters are getting ahead of the problem of reducing risk, and looking, say, at the ambulance service, the police service, who haven't had the same reductions in risk, to say that we deserve exclusivity about public funding is just not a credible position. I fight, as does the Commissioner and the senior officers, I fight very, very hard for London and the London Fire Brigade. That's been reflected in the fact that, as we've discussed, we've got a £15 million better off settlement. It's still a significant reduction. It's £15 million better than we were originally told to plan for, and that has in large part been because of the advocacy work of senior officers at the professional level and myself and other colleagues at the political level. We do fight for London, we do prioritise the safety of London.
So we've got to thank you.
Sounds like it.
I don't trust you.
Talking about priorities, not only Londoners need to be safe, but like you said, the last contribution we had, it is needing to feel safe. And this is where Londoners' priorities are. The mayor has to also look at his priorities, and he has got choices. Whether he does want Londoners to feel and be actually safe when it comes to police or fire service. That is his choice. It is his budget. Yes, we had a relatively better settlement, you might say, from the government, but it's not good enough. I don't believe that the mayor has fought hard enough to make that special case for London, for our emergency services, for our fire services. Also, he has access to resources. You know, the token gesture of penny a day saving is one of the issues which he hasn't considered as part of the savings, you know, to sort of stop closures. There are other factors as well. So it is about the choices. If London Assembly members can come up with balanced budget, using resources, making choices to safeguard Londoners, whether it is police or fire service, the mayor can do as well. Unfortunately,
not only is not looking at seriously the safety of Londoners, not fighting hard enough to get better funding from the government, is actually not listening to anyone, and is actually not, coming to these meetings, talking to residents to put his case forward. This is quite outrageous, and all I would like to say is that please, you've had your say here, but make sure you send your objections, get other community members, people you know, also to respond to this consultation before the 7th of June. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity for the conversation we had tonight. And we will certainly be working very, very hard to keep you, Londoners, and all of us safe. Thank
I've only got one priority. I live on the 7th floor of a block of flats. I can't get downstairs, I'm not allowed to use the lift. My priority is I want the firefighters there if there's an emergency of any sort, with a fire, flood or whatever, because I can't help myself.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So that's my only priority.
Thank you. Just pick up the point that made about to confirm that the consultation is open until the 17th of June, as per the piece of paper on your chairs. I'll just take the opportunity to wrap up and thank you all very much for your attendance this evening. And take this opportunity to thank members of the panel, Commissioner Ron Dobson, Chairman James Cleverly, and Councillor Navin Shah. I'll just reiterate that our website address is within the document that's been handed out on your tables and chairs.